Hi, my name is Jacob Sadavoy,
And I'm Michelle Zuby.
and today we have the honor of being joined with Dr. Hernandez. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
So, you had a chapter in the textbook really talking about socioeconomic status, classism, and barriers that people find themselves in because of where they are, what class they're in. Can you just share some of the current challenges that arise because of socioeconomic status?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about first we talked about having a more precise definition of socioeconomic status, which we refer to as economically disadvantaged. Because typically, depending on who you're talking to, socioeconomic status may include or not include certain variables. And it's kind of a general picture, a combination of income, education, your occupation potentially, in terms of where your class is in a sense. So we use the term economically disadvantaged and use it to refer to populations that meet the federal guideline or below of what they term low income, which is at families that earn 150% of the poverty level. And I know this because I've written about this a couple times. In 2020, the poverty level for a family of four was around 26,000. So 150% of that is around 39,000. I knew this ahead of time. I didn't do any quick math in my head. um, and so economically disadvantaged would be populations that are low income. So around, for a family of four, 39,000 a year or lower. And low income has been shown across multiple, disciplines and research areas to be a correlate of and predictor of outcomes across the lifespan. Educational challenges with educational attainment, employment, health, mental health, physical health. So that's what we wanted to highlight in the chapter that we worked on.
It's fantastic. And I can see, having pinpointed some of those challenges and some of those long-term barriers, they're not able to necessarily kind of access the same situations, resources that somebody else that isn't economically disadvantaged would be able to access. So what are some ways, behavior analytically, that we can look at these systems and find out ways that we can kind of make there be more equitable?
Mm-hmm. That's such a huge area we really need to move in right now. I think getting into schools is a big area where we can start. There's been a lot of, again, correlational research showing that schools in areas that are low income tend to be, so low income schools in a sense are predictors of higher dropout rates, lower overall lifetime earning, and tend to have students with more behavioral challenges. And part of that they've identified is they found correlates between teachers who come from kind of have a better educational background and stronger experience in teaching, and those teachers tend to be found in schools that are in higher income neighborhoods. And behavior analytically, we have all these tools that we've shown empirically to be effective in teaching certain skills. Literacy is a big area that I worked in with Margot and Denise, and just the having effective interventions to support teachers in schools that are not prepared or inexperienced in these areas would make a big difference. Even, in early intervention and even in high schools.
One of the things that is showing up for me as you're explaining, like, where we could get in sooner, a lot of schools buy into positive behavioral supports, and I'm just thinking about how we as behavior analysts can go into those systems, or into those school systems, and put interventions in place before the challenging behavior starts, right? Is there a lot of research out there about that? Like, is that anything that you've looked into, or is that maybe like a direction we can go in? Or I feel like it's a direction we should go in, but I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so behavior analytically, we tend to intervene in early intervention, and not so much in, and like when kids are already in school. And by then, it may be too late, because we see children, Hart and Risley had a seminal study, which maybe has a little, um, um, people have said they may have over exaggerated the 30 million word gap, but other research has shown gaps in vocabulary and learning, between low income and higher income families. Um, but they have shown that, really the learning process has to happen before they get to school. And so if we're waiting until students are in school, then we're missing a big opportunity, in terms of development and preparation, for kids to be prepared to learn, to come to school already ready to learn. And I think what we're missing in our literature is research in parent training. I mean, we know how to train parents. We have behavioral skills training. We're really good at training, but we're maybe not train the populations that could benefit the most from practices. I mean, just having books in your home has been shown to be correlated with kids having higher, more proficient reading levels, higher vocabulary levels, having access to certain types of toys, games, again, higher quality learning experiences. So I think that's where we need to, kind of the direction we need to go in, is getting in there before, before school, in a sense.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Another quick question. A lot of this is systemic. A lot of this is policy changes. Resources need to be accessed. Hypothetically, like kind of, I don't think hypothetically, I think eventually, like kind of, we will be doing more in policy and with government. But what ways can we look at using the applied behavior analysis on policy making to really even out the playing field, so that those that find themselves economically are disadvantaged, that they're able to access more supports, like kind of within their like kind of communities, so that they do have those opportunities that others have in other neighborhoods that aren't economically disadvantaged?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, a lot of our policy comes down to money. We just need more money because we need more resources. So, as I mentioned, we need, to get teachers into schools that may have, less resources and aren't able to offer as much. So there are environments where teachers who have more experience, may not want to, would not choose over a school that has all these great resources, STEM programs, great library access, whatnot, support. We need to, be able to offer potentially teachers better packages in those schools, access to more resources, different, technology in the classrooms, with support groups for helping, younger parents, who tend to not have as much education on best, practice parenting strategies for raising children. I think community support in general would be really helpful, especially for people kind of already not just coming in as an outsider, but there are a lot of people in low income communities that want to do this work, but they don't have the resources to do it. So really supporting and empowering people already there who are passionate about this and know, are in that community, know their neighbors, and would be a much more trusted person than an outsider coming in.
As a former teacher, I would love to see not just your typical professional development, right? Where you did a PD day and you kind of just get information thrown at you, but people really, behavior analysts going into schools and providing the BST, and really working with the teachers hands-on, and then fading out, right? Like, just, again, we know how to do this stuff. But I think so many of the resources are allocated to just professional development, sit for a couple of hours, you've fulfilled your requirement for that year, and you don't really learn anything. And it's never really generalized in the classroom, or you're like, oh, I learned that thing, that day, but I don't really know what to do, and there's no one following through with you. So that's one way I think, we could help. Again, like, so much of it comes down to funding, but even if we could get grant money or something like that. It would be such a great opportunity, because we work in schools, we consult in schools. We've all walked into that classroom that's, for all intents and purposes, a hot mess, and it's no wonder that all the kids are acting up, right? There's no classroom management, and you could do a lot. Not every kid needs an iPad. I mean, you could be really creative, and I think showing teachers. Jake and I have worked internationally, and we've done a lot with paper towel rolls. It's not about having like the fanciest toys, or the latest technology. But yeah, I mean, I love the idea, and I hope that in the near future, we do get there. Have there been any school districts that you're aware of, or maybe you have worked in, where you've seen some of this positive, like a push to get people like us in there sooner, or earlier, to really intervene?
So I guess I haven't really looked into schools in general, but we at Western, in my lab when I was in grad school, we had partnered with a local school district to do that. And we started off just kind of building trust and being in the classroom and helping with whatever the teachers needed. And then they allowed us to implement a whole positive behavior intervention and support system across their middle school. And at the same time, one of my lab mates, Garrett Warlow, who's actually a big OBM guy, he did his dissertation on using certain behavioral policies like check in, check out, and oh, now I'm blanking on the name of it, the CHAMP system. So he was able to run his dissertation on using that program in a few different classrooms and showing how having clear expectations and this is the routine for the day really helped reduce behavioral issues in those classrooms. And he started off fully supporting the teachers and then fading himself out so they could do it on their own, which, as you mentioned, I love that contribution you made in terms of there's a lot that you can do without kind of extra resources, but we need people there to help at first before we can fade ourselves out. And too often, yeah, we come in and we do a training and then we're gone. And what are you supposed to do with those 2 hours that you just learned and supposed to implement on top of your normal lesson plan and everything else? And so I know it is happening. Our incidents, I know, is not an isolated incident or event, but I think we need a larger push.
I think that's fantastic. And you're right, like kind of just doing a 2-hour training, we know that's not going to be effective, like kind of through the literature. Like if you're not following up, if you're not modeling, if you're not giving feedback on performance, then it really is kind of a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back to what you had said. You went into the school district and you said you built trust. You went in there and you asked them what they wanted. And I think that's so important. Michelle and I have numerous conversations of how the behavior analyst is typically a firefighter, where they go in, they bring in their magic wand or their hose and they douse the fire and then they leave. And then that if we're not giving you're not necessarily teaching any skills, you're teaching skills to kind of work with that student. And sometimes you have a referral only to work with that one student. So you're not able to offer classroom-wide strategies. And if that's the case, then you run the risk of potential overgeneralization. So I wanted to go back to kind of what you created when you went into this classroom and you're just offering to help, kind of what opened up and how is that different than going in and kind of directing teachers what to do?
Yeah, this was a great experience for many of us in that program, and I love talking about it. So we started first because one of our lab mates had a personal connection with a teacher at the school, at this middle school, who had a special ed classroom. And she needed some extra support. We had some students that wanted to get a different practicum experience than at our autism center. And so we started off just having the students there every day, kind of doing some one-on-one teaching. And we just were there basically doing whatever they needed. Sometimes we had to run the ISS room. Sometimes we had to escort students different places. I had to drive a student home once. And we literally did whatever they needed. We're like, yes, we'll do that. And then after, a semester of that or half the year of that, The teachers were used to seeing us there. The administration was used to seeing us there. And, we weren't getting paid. We were just showing up and with our, positive attitudes, and they saw the change that was occurring and our relationships with the teachers and the students. And so then that's when they let us, they actually found grant money to create a position that it was a behavior coach position. So we were able to split that between two of our grad students and be there full time throughout the day to help more with what they needed. And we formed connections with parents of kids at the school that we talked to often. And then they trusted us to be able to start, take what we did there and implement it on a larger scale.
Unbelievable. And again, like kind of it's so valuable, but like kind of you invested in the relationship, which is something that we don't necessarily have the mandate to do, but like kind of again applaud you for seeing like the importance and the value, and you probably created like kind of a transformation in their experience with a behavior analyst that wouldn't have existed if you didn't build that relationship.
Oh yeah, and I could definitely talk about anecdotal experience of the very first, few months we were there, and kind of not being given much attention or support from other teachers who were skeptical. When Garrett, as I mentioned, who did his dissertation there, when he first was recruiting teachers for that, they were skeptical about doing it. They're like, "This isn't going to work. You're going to leave, and it's going to fall apart."
Wow.
We've done things like this before, and it's never turned out well. And he did it, and he made it work, and it was such a rewarding and such a huge experience for learning and development for all of us.
Fantastic. You shared you're a teacher. How do you provide or guide your students in behaviors that are necessary for positive interactions, like the one that you had at this in this school?
So let's see. So I'm a teacher at a community college, and a lot of my students are kind of there to get their associate's degree and then either continue in a different pathway or transfer to a school to get a 4-year degree. And I try to really encourage my students to, I give them a lot of resources. I help with career planning, goal setting, 5-year planning. Even though it's not, I teach psychology, but it's not necessarily part of like my role in that, because, regardless of what someone's career path or interests are, whether it's going into welding or plumbing or becoming a behavior analyst, I want to be able to provide them the support that they need to get to that. And I try at least to come across in my classes when we talk, especially in intro to psych, because we do a lot of cool, we talk a lot in different chapters on like social psychology and bias and prejudice, and really get students to examine their maybe pre-existing biases or prejudices, and how, that just happens through our experience. We learn these kind of rules that we apply to society. And it's a good thing in the sense that it helps us, learn and act in certain situations inappropriately. But also, if we're not aware of that, then we're not able to, we may be closed off or treat people unfairly, or have, different or wrong opinions of them. And so regardless of what their pathway is, I try to instill that idea of really self-examination and realization of those biases or prejudices and how they may hold us back in our future.
That's so valuable, because it creates a culture within your classroom and amongst your students, to be introspective, and then to be mindful, right? Like mind your perspective when you're outside the classroom. And, we've had this conversation with several of the contributors, how, you may not get that at home, right? And especially like if you're, and regardless of maybe like what your socioeconomic status is, but a lot of us tend to live in communities with similar people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you just think, oh, well, everybody's that way. And these other people are not that way, right? And it's sort of this like us against them kind of a thing. So I think that's a nice place to foster that thought process. And I would imagine you probably do have a lot of diversity within a community college. So you can have students interact. And I love that it's like not part of really like the curriculum per se, but you weave it in there. And it's just great to see that because, Jacob and I have talked about this at great length. Like we spend a lot of our day at work, right? And for a student, a lot of your day is spent at school. So like, why not create systems, where culture is like built in, right? And we can learn these things that we may not be getting elsewhere, So I applaud you for that. I can really appreciate having that mindset, for your students.
Thank you. And it's a very small community college, and it's just myself and another woman who are the full-time psychology professors. Amy Skirma, she actually went to Western also back in the day. She was a Jack Michael student. And so even though we're at this like small community college, we also push behavior analytic perspective all the time. In like every class, she teaches an interpersonal class and uses Dale Carnegie examples of behavior. And it's a really fun place to work, and I enjoy being able to get in my behavior analytic perspective and everything that we talk about.
That's great. Like these students don't even know what that's being weaved in, but like it is. And well, I'm assuming they find it fascinating because I would appreciate it greatly. That's amazing. Dr. Hernandez, thank you so much. This was wonderful. And this was longer than we told you it would be. So apologize for that. Such a good conversation. Is there anything that you're up to? Anything you'd like to talk about, promote, share? Resources, you shared some, and we'll put them in the links. Is there anything else that you'd like to shout out?
Yes. So one of the big pieces that we talked about in our chapter was what you can do if you're interested in potentially helping out with economically disadvantaged or lower income families and populations. And for me, in my experience, the biggest one, as we touched on today, is just making those partnerships with people in your community, schools, doctors, social workers, people that aren't in our, they don't have our behavior analytic mindset, and that's fine. They have their perspective. I personally work a lot in the summer with a health professor who does literacy English she works on adult literacy with English language learners to help them be able to prepare food and shop for themselves in healthy ways. Another challenge that we tend to see with people from low income families have low literacy and have more adverse health outcomes. And we maybe butt heads on our ideas of how we should do things, but partnering with her, it's given me a new perspective. And if you're interested in this area, you just have to find someone to work with and put the time in, and you probably won't get paid for a while, and that's fine. You'll get paid in the results that you see. And I think that's really true.
So good. And again, like anybody can do that. So like, again, like, thank you for sharing that, because if there is somebody, and I think that happens so much now, when there's so much happening in the world, so much of which is not good or not going the way that we want it to go, because of the injustice and the level of inequality. I think it's of such value just to small, simple steps, how you can kind of make a change, so that again, like kind of you're contacting and aligning your values with like kind of your actions and your behaviors. So like kind of thank you so much for that.
Thank you. It was great to share everything. And if you're interested, I feel like a lot of behavior analysts got into the field because they just want to help people. And so this is one big area that needs a lot of help.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so very much for your time. Really appreciate it.